Good afternoon. We are the Tex Fire team. My name is Jorge Gonzalez. This is Shawn. Here are some examples of wildfires in Texas. So let me give you a little brief background about wildfires. So wildfires were a thing that people were like, they knew that they were a threat, but not that big of a threat. And that all changed in 2011. In 2011, we have a very dry season with windy conditions. All of those are fuels for wildfires. So what came as an outcome was around 30,000 fires. And what coined that season, or what caught people's eye, was a Bastrop case. Bastrop is a county 35 miles east of Austin. So what happened in Bastrop was that you have 3 wildfires that merged together. And those 3 wildfires destroyed 1,700 homes. But the most impressive thing is that they incurred $350 million in expense insurance. So after all this happened, Mr. Bill Plummer came to us, and he was aware of the threat of wildfires, and he basically wanted us to realize this idea of fighting them more efficiently. So we were faced with these problems, which was we have these fires, they are being extinguished really late, so they cause a lot of damage. We can prevent that, right? We need to find which aircraft do we use, which one is the most effective. Where do we put those aircraft, and how much will it cost us to do this project, and if it's going to work. So our definition is we're just trying to make the process of firefighting more efficient, and we see an opportunity to do business because there's really limited aerial fighting capability in Texas. Our goals were to research fire history, understand the process, implement it, find the aircraft, build a model to put the aircraft, to locate them, and build a business case for the project that will show us how is it good for business or not, and prove that the project will in fact work. Now let me hand it to Shawn so he can explain more.
Thanks, Jorge. All right, so like Jorge said, what we needed to do was we had to do some research first. We needed to figure out how Texas was fighting wildfires and how they were using aerial assets. All right, so one of the first things that we kind of looked at was the procedures that were involved to get the assets in place to fight the wildfires. Now, it may be interesting to know that the state of Texas does not own its own aircraft firefighting assets. It does utilize Texas National Guard from now and then for their helicopters and stuff, but they don't have any of their own fixed wing. They rely on nationally contracted assets. All right. Second thing that we found out was there's a lot of agencies involved, starting out with the initial fire, going all the way up through Texas Forest Service, and then if it's a large fire, it moves on to either the Southern Area Coordination Center, who has to be informed, and they now become the lead incident commander, kind of, as you might want to say, or it may even go, may all go all the way up to the National Interagency Coordination Center, which governs the entire nation. Okay, so lots of agencies, lots of paperwork, lots of time involved to get an asset in place. All right. When we spoke with the Texas Forest Service, they basically said if they needed an aircraft asset, it took a minimum of 1 day to get the asset into place and to start being utilized. So next we need to figure out the type of assets that were involved. All right, there's a couple. We got 4 listed here on the screen. The very first one up in the upper left-hand corner is a very large air tanker. They call it a VLAT. All right, there's only a couple of them that are operating in the U.S. right now. That happens to be a DC-10. Extremely large aircraft. It's a DC-10. Okay, it carries 12,000 gallons of retardant. It can put out a lot of fire. It can squelch a good portion of the area. The only problem is there's only about 40 runways in the United States that can handle this thing. All right, and most of those are military airfields. Okay, so for a rapid response, and plus the time to fill it and stuff, it just takes a long time to fill this thing up. It's not very rapid on how it gets on scene. All right. Over on the right-hand side is a P-3. It too, very capable aircraft, carries about 3,000 gallons of retardant. It, though, also requires a long runway, and the time to pre-flight it and get it on station is about 3 to 4 hours. And it requires 7,000 foot or greater runway in order to land. So it too is not as rapid or as efficient. Bottom left is a CL415 Super Scooper. Now, these things are kind of cool just because they can land on lakes and stuff and scoop up almost 3,000 gallons of water. But I don't know if anybody's drove by Lake Ray Hubbard, Lake Levon, any of those other things. You see all these trees sticking up out of the lakes everywhere we go because of low lake levels. That would not bode well for that particular aircraft. Okay, so therefore it's not even really used in the state of Texas. And we already mentioned Texas Air National Guard helicopters that are utilized. All right. Bad thing about them is they only carry about 100 to 600 gallons, depending on the size of the bucket that they utilize. All right. So then we have seed aircraft, and this is going to be the focus of our project. All right. Single engine air tanker, typically the AT-802 Foxtrot, carries 800 gallons of retardant. It can be airborne within 30 minutes, well within 30 minutes. They so happen to be manufactured here in the state of Texas. All right. They got about a 200 mile an hour transit speed and about a 4-hour endurance. Very capable aircraft. So with that being kind of the choice aircraft that we wanted to go with, because one, that aircraft is also cheaper. Imagine the price of it, price of DC-10, right? So with the price being cheaper, we're like, where can we base these runways out of? Well, the 802 only requires about a 3,000 foot runway surface. So luckily for us, the state of Texas already has seat plans in place for a lot of the runways throughout the state. Those are depicted right there in that graph to the right. Those particular runways have ready access to fuel and water, so for quick turnaround times. And also, if you wanted to base a pair of aircraft at one of these bases, there's available hangar space available and facilities for administration and maintenance activities. So once we figured out the plane, we figured out where we could put the planes, now we needed to understand how wildfires are actually fought and how they occur in Texas and what their causes are, to figure out where the highest concentration is. So lots of different factors go into this. You've got a diverse landscape, you've got a diverse population. The east side is it has a lot more population density than the west. The west is way drier than the east. Okay, you got the humidity from the Gulf that kind of circles up and it kind of keeps the ignitable surface fuels down on the ground layer. We have high wind speeds usually out west, right, coming across the plains. Those can fan a fire and really increase the rate of speed. Okay, and then you have ignition sources. All right. We have lightning, storms, just like we saw out here today, equipment and people, all of these different things going to start these fires. So over the next several slides, I'm going to show you just a quick run through of the types of data that we were dealing with. All right, so this right here is Texas's vegetation. You see that out there further on the right. It's a little bit, the greener colors indicate a greener vegetative state, whereas as far as to the west, it's kind of drier. Surface fuels, once again here, greener's better, browner's not as good. All right, this right here is the rate of spread, and this is kind of fueled by the surface fuels that are available and wind. On this screen right here, orange is bad. All right, this right here is the current active Texas wildfire threat. Green is good, orange is bad. All right, this is all of the fire ignition histories from 2005 to 2009. There's over 16,000 dots depicted on this screen. Blue, the largest portion of these fires here, are started typically by people, children, burning debris and stuff like that. Those are, and you can see most of this stuff is over. Most of those ignitions are on the west, whereas you get to more toward, or on the east. When you get back toward the west, you kind of notice a little bit more greens and yellows. Those happen to be lightning and equipment. So you can see that there's a difference on how fires start or started, depending on the region. And then the biggest telling graph that we had was this one right here. This right here shows the amount of large wildfires versus the population density across the state. As you can see, it's not really a uniform density. Out toward the east, there's not that many wildfires, but when you start basically from central to west Texas, you kind of get you see that they are more dense, there's a lot more of them. So this is what led us to go, and these are the things that we incorporated into the model so that we could accurately place the facilities in the model?
So we used the GANS model for the seed basing location. What we basically did was we gathered the longitude and latitudes of 254 counties and 48 facilities that were capable of having the seed aircraft, 47 actually. So with some series of equations so that everyone will be covered, right? You have paths, you have distances. We were to minimize those distances, but we want to incorporate also the factor of the acres burned, fire history. Like there's more fires in the west, so we wanted to put importance on that topic. So we invented the torch score. Torch score is you have a certain amount of people per acre in certain counties, right? And then you combine that with the acres burned based on fire history in that county, and you get the torch score, which is a scalar. So it's a multiplier so that to make the land loans more, the ones that are near fires more important than the other ones. And Shawn is going to visually explain to you how does this work.
So when we ran the model, we first ran the model for just distance only to see what the distribution across the state would be. We ran it for both 2, 3, and 4 facilities. All right, and those are depicted by the screens there on the bottom, and you can see which airfields were selected in the model process. Pretty even distribution, it kind of looks like, basically distances, not too shabby. But when we incorporate the torch score, we can see that the distribution is not as even, and that's not a bad thing. Because the idea here is that we want to get the facilities closer to where the fires are, right, where the fire history is. And 2 facilities, 3 facilities, and 4 facilities across the bottom. And the list of where the aircrafts were placed up there in the upper right-hand corner. So, as you can see, most of the fires were in the middle and not off to the east. And that's what allows this to kind of skew, right? Because let's take Mineral Wells, for example, which happens to be right here. None of these fires, right in here, these counties in here really matter because there's not that many fires that happen right in there. So therefore, Mineral Wells can cover this portion right here, and it's closer to the scene, it's closer to the action. Pass it back to Jorge. Okay.
So we needed to make this project a business. Mr. Bill Plummer was eager for us to create the business case for this project. And most of this information was provided by dealerships or similar businesses in other states. We just grabbed big ticket items like the aircraft, the hangar, the salaries, management. We came up with the totals on the bottom with 2 facilities, with 1 facility, 2 aircraft, 2 facilities, 4 aircraft. So for our project, the most optimal number of facilities and aircraft is the 3 facilities, 6 aircraft. And we came with a cost, if you rent a hangar here, of how much will it cost you just starting off an estimate? It's $12,649,836. And if I told that number to you, you're going to say, wow, this is really expensive. But if you go back to the Bastrop case, $350 million in expenses, right? So if this project works, it will reduce that damage to 44%. That 44% can pay the project 14.36 times. So if you think about it, it's not that much.
So we needed to run a simulation to make sure that our assumptions were correct. So real quickly, we picked one data set, 2009. We picked all wildfires that are larger than 500 acres and that lasted less than 1 day. Now, the reason we used less than 1 day was because the state of Texas told us that they cannot get aircraft on scene until 1 day. So what we had in front of us was actual fires that burned within 1 day. All right, and we simulated 1 aircraft for this scenario. That got us down to 19 fires in 2009 that kind of fit these parameters. All right, we figured out a time to initial drop, and then the cycle times that would be involved after that, and then we just ran the scenario to see how much acres would have burned if we had been able to utilize the aircraft. All right, we saw a 54% average reduction of acres burned per fire. All right, with an overall reduction of 48%. We were able to get the plane to the scene in about 1.2 hours, and the cycle time of each one of the aircraft from drop to drop was about 0.7 hours. And that's what this graph displays right here. All right, so our conclusions. Sea aircraft would be a valuable asset in the state of Texas, all right? one day of having a large air tanker show up by having a seed aircraft show up in 1 hour, it is a good thing, all right? We really believe it's possible and it's feasible, and the solutions provided in here as far as where placement would actually benefit the state. The problem that you may run up against, though, is one, funding. We're talking aviation here. You have high costs. You have years where the fires are not as prevalent. 2010, 2011, last couple of years, 2012, 2013, really hasn't been a large wildfire issue. So you have the current contracting structure that is in place right now. And this may not bode well for the state going against national contracts and how they already exist. So, in order to start this, you're going to need concurrence and support and cooperation from the state. Make sure that everything is coordinated in order to get this project up and running. So, with that,
Finally, we have some alternative uses when there is no fire season. So we can use the airplane for deforestation, dropping seeds where there was fire damage. You can use it for agricultural spraying, fertilizing the fields, or waste-oil spraying, which is a trend right now, or border protection, so that we can still generate revenues and profit. Meanwhile, there are no fires. And we're finished. Thank you very much. And do you have any questions?
I love this project, and I worked with you guys closely on it, and Mr. Palmer said he wished he could read it. Looks like you could save a lot of money for insurance companies, maybe you could get them to help finance it.
We were thinking that alternative.
that would be a possibility. Right now, we're talking $12 to $13 million for the startup cost on 3 facilities. So right there does not take into account any profits or revenues coming in. You figure you would be a state entity, you would be running this business, you don't expect any profits, right, if you're going to run it. Now, if you're a private entity and you wanted to run this, you would hope to be able to contract to the state. But then you got to get away from the current contracting policies that are in place. So for that reason, there's some hurdles to jump in order to start up something like this within the state. So it's
You
funny.
need a good advocate or something.
Yes.
That's where Mr. Palmer comes in. He is friends with governors and those guys. So. Questions? Thank you very much.
So you have startup costs, right?
Yes.
What are the running costs, operating the whole thing with 6 aircraft for a year? Did you look at?
Okay, so that was all included in the 12. So that was startup cost plus one year's worth of operating costs.
And what was the part of the operating cost?
So
Because you
the
don't have
airplanes
to-
cost roughly $1.3 million a piece.
Mhm.
So and we
And then-
figured six aircraft.
So it was about 2 million aircraft, so 700,000 is
Yep.
1 year operating
Mhm.
an aircraft? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.